Yeah, but well, we were in high school, and I'm 16, I'm a sophomore, Jamie's 18, he's a senior, and well, initially what attracted me to him was he was wearing a Danzig t-shirt, which at the time was a pretty obscure band, but it was my favorite band. So I decided I have to meet this boy. He has on this Danzig t-shirt, and I knew in that initial conversation that I'm going to be with him. I'm in love with him. I'm going to marry him. But so this is on a Wednesday, and he tells me later on in the week, yeah, I'm going to join the fire department on Monday. And at the time, I'm 16. I'm a child. I'm a spoiled little girl. Would that describe me?
A little bit, yeah.
And I'm like, he's like a man. He wants to start his life, and this is crazy. And I told my girlfriend, like, I don't know if I want to be with him anymore, because I don't know that I want to spend my whole life worrying about him being a firefighter. But I was all in. I was just addicted to that boy from jump. So
Jamie was, he was, I'm going to say a little bit on the wild side, or not necessarily rebellious, but he pushed the edge on most things. And when he decided he wanted to join the fire department, his brother was already on, and myself. And he grew up there. Matter of fact, I got on 1 month after he was born, so he's grown up in the fire department all this time. And then when he went through this rebellious teenage years and everything, but then when he got to where he wanted to be part of the fire department, he was the first one we ever put on that was still in high school. And he had already had his rookie school already done. I was a training officer at the time, so that probably helped, but he already had his rookie school on. He was a second-class fireman. By the time he ever even got on, he had taken all the classes, and it was just something he wanted to do. And I really thought that the turning point in his life was when he met Julie, and then he fell in love and had a purpose. You know, I never really thought about that time as it being the fire department, but I think it all just kind of works out real good together. And he was certainly the hardest working,
oh yeah.
strongest young man you've ever seen. You could.
Well, what's amazing about him accomplishing all of that is he had dyslexia, and not like a mild case of dyslexia, like probably the most extreme case of dyslexia that anybody,
When, like I say, I was a training officer, so without having to do it, I decided that we read all the tests instead of writing the tests, and so I never had to put him in a spot to where he could, and if he was listening, if he would hear it, he was excellent at it.
Yeah.
So I think it's really the first thing he ever excelled in, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just his niche,
Yeah.
like when we talked about moving to Florida and I looked for other occupations, things that he might be interested in, it always pointed back, like people with dyslexia should be firefighters, because the way that their brains work, like they can almost like hover over the scene, and like how he was so good with directions and just quick thinking, because that's the way that his mind was. So yeah, it was a natural fit.
As a personality, though, he's kind of like a bull in a china shop, and he's about my height, but he's 230 or 240 pounds, just a brute, and everything he did was just full on. He was one of the best firemen I've ever seen, just because of how hard he would go about it. And we had the best fire department then, because the other guys would try to keep up with him, and which they couldn't do. But anyway, he really inspired a lot of people just by his efforts and how much he tried. But the very first day that we did any training, and the very first thing we did, I was going to do his orientation. So I'm going to take him around through the truck. So we start with the rescue truck. Very, very first thing he did was he opened the door, hit him right in the nose. and it gave him a bloody nose looking at it. So it should have been a clue right there that things weren't going to be good in his career, because he'd go about things so fast and so hard. He just really go at him. But the boy wasn't afraid of anything. The man, to me, he seemed like a boy, but like Julie said, she didn't know how to. All her girls was going with boyfriends, and she had a man friend.
Yeah, and I was still in my rebellious stage. I was not ready to grow up, and Jamie's like, no, this is life, and this is the way that it's going to be, and I'm I'm going to be a firefighter, and that's the story.
But he truthfully had more certifications than anybody on our department for training. He went clear to New York before just to take a class in a rescue class there. He went all over the country
Oh, yeah.
doing, and if it'd pop up and they'd say, oh, they're doing a rapid intervention team training in Georgia. Where's Jamie? Well, he's in Georgia, you know.
I have a stack of all of his certifications, all these different, I mean, he was just so, just all about learning and bringing it back to the fire department. And I would get frustrated because he was never home and always wanted to be. And he's like, I have to learn this. I have to show these guys how to do it. But he was so passionate about it. He just absolutely loved it.
And I think that him being good at it,
Yeah.
you know, he was never good at anything because of his learning disabilities. And I think that when he got in here and he found out he could be good and he could excel, and it didn't depend on what everybody else thought, it depended on what he did, and he could learn anything. So he was just a excellent fireman and excellent young man. He was polite. People like him.
Sweet.
Oh, my God. And
I
then,
never knew you did that with the reading, having the test written.
Yeah.
Because Jamie would put it out there,
Yeah.
rather than like let someone discover that he had challenges with reading or writing or spelling. He'd just be like, man, I can't spell, I have dyslexia.
Yeah.
Or actually wouldn't even say he had dyslexia.
Yeah.
He would just say, I can't spell.
when we did all of our second class training and
I didn't know
everything,
that.
I read all the tests to him, and whenever he would go to any of the schools, like the state schools, I would go with him too, and I'd always sit across from him because inevitably they would make you read some part of the material or whatever. So I'd try to be there so I could help him pick out a word. And I remember almost from the get-go, he'd say, I got it. And he'd just go balls first and say, okay, here, I'm gonna do it. Whether if I stumble, they'll see me stumble, but this is me, and that's just the attitude he took with it.
I took EMT classes with him when I had no interest in any of it. I knew I would never pursue anything like that, but I'm like, this is going to be a challenge for him. Let's just take the class together. And yeah, same thing though. Like I thought I'd end up being in there and have to help him all the time. And he's always like, it ain't nothing but a thing. That was one of his favorite phrases.
He ended up being quite an EMT too, and I'm not sure if I was a medic in the Army, and I always told a lot of stories about that, and I don't know if that made him want to challenge that a little bit, and maybe be a better one than me or something, but anyway, he really took to it, and he was so good with the people. I've been on several calls when an old lady would get up there and say, Jamie, is that you? And they just want to know if he was there, or, if it was one of the people that we got there, and they just loved him, and he had such a good way with him, and as much as a brute he was, he'd always call him sweetheart or honey or something like that, and make him feel so comfortable, and he'd hold him, he's protective, wasn't he?
Very.
And he'd just make him feel good, and everybody just loved him, and he went on from being a miracle that he ever was able to become an EMT to he was the assistant chief of the ambulance service there, and it was, quite an accomplishment above and beyond all the other things he did. That was I'd say his number one accomplishment.
Well, let's not forget that he survived leukemia.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess in 2003.
No, it was 2001. It was right after 9/11.
Okay.
When,
Well, he was diagnosed with leukemia, and
yeah.
so then had been in remission all this time. But I think, I'd never want to say, I'm thankful that he had cancer, but I would not, I'm thankful that he had cancer. I am, because it, made us have such a different appreciation for our lives, and, he was already so strong, but then after that, he's just like, I can do anything, and he wasn't afraid to die anymore, and, I look at other widows that never had to, or didn't have the conversations that Jamie and I had already had because we'd already been through that, so it's like I knew what his wishes were, and, the last thing I said to Jamie before he went on that fire call was, I love you, be safe, because we never took for granted that you don't know what's going to happen, and, try to be thankful for those things, but.
His leukemia, when they we didn't, any of us know it. We went down to Indianapolis, his doctor sent him down there, and we're out there thinking he's gonna go get a vitamin infusion.
For the weekend.
Yeah, for the
hang out
weekend.
in
Yeah, we were gonna
Indy,
hang
yeah.
out, go to the pool, everybody had their trunks. You know?
We didn't know how sick he was.
Yeah, nobody knew. So when they finally checked, and we was even gonna leave because
Yeah.
the lady was real rude at the reception desk that we were going in, and so we were gonna leave the hospital and go home. He's saying, piss on this. I'm not gonna listen to her. And so we started out, and they said, and they said, calm down, wait a minute, you know. So then they checked us in, and they said, go to the 8th floor, and we're still kind of like thinking, oh,
We don't know what's
we're just
going
here for the
on.
weekend.
Yeah.
And the doors open up on the elevator, and it says the adult cancer ward. And we said,
Like,
what the
why
hell?
are we here? What is going
Yeah.
on? And that's when we looked at Jamie's,
Yeah.
when they checked him in, we thought he was gonna be outpatient. It would just be for the day, and then we'd hang out in the hotel, like you said. And we looked at his band, and it said inpatient. We're like, why does this thing say inpatient? And when we got to the room, the nurse said, Jamie, you might as well get comfortable. You're gonna be here for the next 30 days. And we're like, what? At that point,
Yeah.
we didn't even know that he had cancer.
And it was an isolation unit,
Yeah.
so it wasn't like he's just going on a ward or anything. He's going into an isolation unit, and it was 30 years old, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was 29.
29.
Yeah.
And they says, oh, and by the way, well, first off, let me tell you this, they offered him his choices of
Oh, right.
chemo, and there was a low-dose type of thing that they could give him on a regular basis, or they could give him this high-dose heresies that they just blast him. And
Of course.
it
What
just
does he
knock
pick?
him for a loop, you know. But the thing is, he had a 99% chance of recovery, wasn't it 99 or 90?
Of,
It was
of going into remission?
of going into remission.
Jamie had a 17% chance of going into remission.
Oh, well, I thought
He
they
didn't
said
have
it was
very
like a
good
sure
odds.
thing if he took it, if he took the high dose anyway. It seemed to me like the better odds was on
Yeah, it
that,
was
so,
definitely the better
yeah.
odds on the higher doses of chemo, but yeah.
But anyway, anybody else, it would have killed me. I know it would have killed me. It was just, it knocked him for such a loop because they just blasted him. But I've got to say too, and I've said it since that day, if it wouldn't have been for Julie, he would have died there because she took such good care of him. She didn't know anything about,
And I didn't like any of that. I didn't like any of that
she
stuff
didn't like
either.
anything about medicine. She didn't know anything about it, but she learned everything. And she knew more about leukemia. She knew more about all this stuff, all about platelets, about blood transfusions, about all this. And man, I mean, these nurses, even one got fired because he didn't do the stuff he was supposed to do. And but anyway, if it wouldn't have been for her hovering over him and watching what they did and insisting that they change procedures and
Well,
stuff
yeah.
on the platelets when it
Yeah.
wasn't working good, and he would have never lived. He would have been dead then. So in a way, we had already prepared for him to die.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we thought that he was gone. Then,
And there were
but
so many times it was so touch and go.
Yeah.
You know, we'd go in and be like, oh, and you know, we'd ask he was in IU, which is a teaching hospital. You know, so it'd be a team of doctors, and we would ask them like, you know, what do you think? And they'd be like, oh, we'll just have to wait and see. And we'd be like, this is not going very well at all. And Jamie, like, the nurses would change shifts, and Jamie would be like, oh, be careful on your way home. Like, just super sweet the whole time, and never upset about any of it.
No.
He's just like, you know, whatever will be, will be. And even after what about the time when we had to take him to see if he was in remission or not? So after his rounds of chemo, we have to wait like a month to see if the drugs have worked, and we have to go back to this appointment. And so while we're waiting to go back to this appointment for these weeks, you know, I'm just like sick. I'd like go in the other room and cry because I would never cry in front of him because I didn't want him. Well, he would never bring it up. He never talked about it. And I'm like, you know what? That's how he deals with it. He's internalizing it, you know. But we knew we had to go get a bone marrow biopsy, and we go to Indianapolis, which was like a 3-hour drive. He doesn't talk about anything about it. He's not upset, nothing. And we're walking into the hospital, and he stops dead in his tracks, and he like clenches up and he looks at me and he goes, oh, F. He says the F word. And I said, what? And he goes, I got to get that bone thing today, don't I? And I'm like, okay, it's not just that he hasn't wanted to talk about it. He hasn't even thought about it. Like, that's just the way that he was. He didn't, you know, like, I'm so anxious and obsessive and wringing my hands all the time. And Jamie was just like, what? Very zen.
But he went from that to being an Ironman athlete.
Yeah,
you know,
he's
and
Ironman.
he was like I say, he was a brute, but he was husky. He couldn't do that sort of thing. He wouldn't run around the block, would
Oh,
he?
no, yeah.
You know, if he didn't have
wasn't
to,
a
he'd
runner.
drive.
Yeah.
And he started out walking on a treadmill. Then he figured, well, if I'm gonna walk, I might as well run. And then
Yeah.
he started running. And then if he's gonna run, he might as well do a 5K. And then he might as well do a 10K. And I couldn't begin. You might have some idea how many races he's
Oh,
done.
no,
but
I have no idea. I
Yeah.
mean, 100, I don't know. Well, it was like 3 years after he had been remission, and I still couldn't say the word leukemia without crying. I mean, it was still so, and I was so worried about him all the time. I'm like, I got to do something positive about this. I can't be, with Jamie, I'm like this all the time. Like, are you okay? Are you sick? Do you have a cold? I'm like, he can't live this way. I can't live this way. So we got involved with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, and they have team and training. And so Jamie, yeah, he started doing, first it was marathons, and then cycling events, and then triathlons, and then he went on to be a coach with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society and mentored. And
they raised over $30,000
Yeah.
for between Julie and him. And he'd go to schools and talk to the kids, and they'd save their pennies with
oh
him.
yeah,
you
pennies
know,
for patients.
pennies for
yeah.
patients they'd save and give them. But overall, they raised more than $30,000 for the society.
And he's someone that always had a huge fear of public speaking, and with him coaching and mentoring, and we would go to meetings to try to encourage other people to sign up for, because it's all about fundraising, and he'd get up there in front of the group and tell his story about leukemia, and like you said, go to all these assemblies at these different schools. He's just, they need to make a movie about him. He's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
He has quite a story. He was on billboards forever for blood donation.
Yeah,
and
they had him on billboards around South Bend, and his pictures on there, and he's just an incredible guy. And then he got to the rank of assistant chief on the fire department too. And I think it might have been his downfall, because he just wanted too bad to be too successful and to show the guys. And he shouldn't have even been doing the work. When he got killed, he should have had other people doing it, but he's going to do it himself, that's how he was. And he just full speed ahead, damn the torpedoes, and that's just how he was. But his whole career was like that. When I was a chief, I always had him do the ventilation, because to me, that was the toughest job of any of them, and the most fearful. And he would always do that. He was our
Yeah,
best
no
man for
problem.
cutting the roofs and getting in there. He had a good life, and he loved Julie more than anybody in the world that I've ever known love anybody, unless it'd be my wife and me. But he had a good life. So he's 42, 41 years old, and
Yeah.
It ain't no picnic getting old anyway. So
They were sitting behind me, and I'm showing them pictures on my phone, and they're showing me pictures on their phone. Like, Jamie, just happy,
Yeah.
smiley.
Yeah, he had a good
all
life.
he had a great life, and passionate about everything he did, and
and
always
I'd
laughing and smiling.
I'd certainly
and-
rather have 40 years of a good life than
Yeah.
60 or 80 of a bad one. So
Yeah,
we
sure.
we mourn him very much, and we miss him very much. But at the same time, we're so very proud that we could have been a part of his life and contribute to him being the kind of man he was, because he certainly left an impression. Our whole town mourned. They still mourn. Everybody loved him, and you can't ask for more than that. None of us are getting out alive anyway.